Steve McQueen's 6 most hated co-stars. Simple version O. McQueen. Crazy McQueen played characters on screen who were loners. They were rebellious and a little moody. Did you put your own personality into these characters? Yeah. You are a loner. Hollywood's king of cool held grudges. 6 of them, to be exact. Before he died too young, Steve McQueen talked about the co-stars he couldn't stand. Behind his tough guy act was a man who was fed up with big egos, backstabbing, and fake charm. From sabotage on movie sets to explosive fights, these are the 6 actors who pushed McQueen to his breaking point. Paul Newman on the surface. The Towering Inferno in 1974 looked like a dream movie. 2 of Hollywood's biggest male stars, Steve McQueen and Paul Newman, working together in an epic disaster film filled with high-stakes drama, action, and spectacle. To fans and critics, putting them together seemed like perfect casting. But behind the scenes, the pairing was less like a perfect match and more like a carefully managed battle of egos. The simmering tension between McQueen and Newman turned what could have been an exciting partnership into a quiet but calculated standoff. One of the first signs of trouble came not during filming, but during negotiations beforehand. McQueen, known for paying attention to every detail and being very sensitive about how he looked on screen, was reportedly obsessed with making sure he had as many lines as Newman. According to multiple sources, McQueen carefully counted each line of dialogue and allegedly discovered that Newman had a slight advantage. He then went to screenwriter Sterling Silliphant and asked him to add 12 extra lines to his character, Fire, Chief Mike O'Halloran, so that his screen time would be exactly equal to Newman's architect, Doug Roberts. For McQueen, this wasn't just about screen presence. It was about pride, status, and protecting his image as Hollywood's top anti-hero. Newman, on the other hand, was reportedly furious when he found out about McQueen's behind-the-scenes manipulation. According to crew members and press reports at the time, Newman called McQueen a chicken shit in front of others, an unusually blunt insult from the otherwise diplomatic actor. It showed just how much McQueen's line counting had bothered him, ruining what could have been a respectful, creative relationship. The competition didn't end with dialogue. Perhaps the most famous example of their rivalry was over billing and promotional materials. Both McQueen and Newman demanded top billing, and neither would back down. With neither man willing to give in, the studio came up with a rare compromise. Posters and promotional materials, their names were printed diagonally, with Newman's name going from top left to bottom right, and McQueen's from bottom left to top right. This optical trick made sure that neither name appeared above the other, depending on which direction you looked first. It was a clever solution to a very real standoff. Both actors were paid the same amount, $1 million plus a percentage of the box office gross, but it was clear that being equal in paycheck alone wasn't enough. Ego loomed large over the production, and both men were very aware of their place in the Hollywood hierarchy. The root of their tension may have come from their contrasting personalities and career philosophies. Newman, the son of a sporting goods store owner who trained at the prestigious Yale School of Drama, had built a reputation as a thoughtful, serious actor. His charm was intellectual, his aura polished, and he used his fame to support liberal causes and charity work. McQueen, in contrast, was a self-made icon, a former juvenile delinquent and Marine who had clawed his way to the top through grit, instinct, and an unmistakable screen presence. He didn't trust easily, often viewed co-stars as threats, and frequently clashed with directors over creative control. The set of The Towering Inferno became a quiet battleground where these differences played out. Newman reportedly found McQueen's competitiveness childish. While McQueen saw Newman's sophistication as condescending, the two rarely hung out off camera and never became close, despite working side by side for weeks. To their credit, both men remained professionally disciplined. They never allowed their rivalry to turn into open sabotage or public confrontation. On screen, their chemistry worked, ironically fueled by the very real undercurrent of tension that made their characters dynamic more believable. In many ways, their mutual wariness elevated their performances, each pushing the other to bring intensity and seriousness to the disaster genre. Yet, the rivalry remained etched into Hollywood lore. Unlike other famous pairings who grew close, after sharing a film, think Redford and Newman in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, McQueen and Newman never worked together again. The tension from the towering inferno lingered, and whatever admiration they may have had for one another never turned into friendship. In later interviews, Newman was tight-lipped about McQueen. He never publicly expressed admiration or dislike, choosing instead for careful silence, which spoke volumes. McQueen, who passed away in 1980, reportedly viewed Newman as a worthy rival, but never quite let go of the perceived competition. For McQueen, who had long resented being seen as a working-class alternative to more classically trained actors, standing equal to Newman wasn't just symbolic. It was a personal victory. Decades later, The Towering Inferno stands not just as a landmark disaster film, but also as a monument to ego diplomacy. It's a film powered by two of Hollywood's most magnetic stars, whose shared screen time was as much about the flames of rivalry as it was about the literal inferno consuming the skyscraper around them, behind every smoldering glance and clipped line delivery. There was a silent competition raging, a battle for dominance that never quite burned out. Yul Brynner during the filming of The Magnificent Seven in 1960. Tension simmered behind the iconic Western's rugged facade, most notably between two of its stars, Steve McQueen and Yul Brynner. What played out on screen as a tale of friendship and stoic heroism was in reality riddled with quiet sabotage, jealousy, and subtle power plays. At the center of the conflict was McQueen, a rising star whose dissatisfaction with his limited role drove him to clash with both the director and his co-star in a calculated effort to claim more of the spotlight. McQueen was cast as Veng Tanner, one of the seven gunmen in what was initially considered a supporting role to Brynner's commanding lead. Chris Adams. At the time, McQueen was still building his name in Hollywood, fresh off the success of the TV series Wanted, Dead or Alive. But in a production filled with testosterone and egos, McQueen quickly found himself frustrated at the margins. His role, reportedly limited to just 7 lines, was a bitter pill to swallow for an actor with ambitions far beyond the small supporting part he'd been assigned. McQueen voiced his frustration directly to director John Sturges, requesting not just more lines, but more influence behind the camera. Sturges, who had championed McQueen's casting, recognized the young actor's raw charisma and quietly allowed him some leeway to enhance his performance physically, if not verbally. This opened the door for what would become a series of small but pointed attempts by McQueen to upstage Yul Brynner, whose presence was meant to anchor the film. Throughout the shoot, McQueen used a variety of on-camera tactics to draw the audience's attention, often during scenes where Brynner was meant to be the focus, whether it was flipping coins, adjusting his hat repeatedly, or shaking shotgun shells in his belt. McQueen made sure he had something in motion whenever he appeared in the frame. These actions, subtle but effective, created visual distractions that threatened to undermine Brynner's authority as the film's central figure. One of the most blatant examples of McQueen's undermining came in the form of a petty height battle. Brynner, known for his signature bald head and theatrical presence, was sensitive about his height. To maintain an imposing presence on camera, he often stood on small mounds of dirt or arranged the scenery to favor his height in wide shots. McQueen, aware of this habit, allegedly knocked over one of Brynner's dirt mounds between takes, a silent but defiant move that captured the tension between the two men. McQueen's behavior was not only about screen time, it reflected a deeper insecurity and envy. Brenner, already a respected figure, thanks to The King and I and other prestigious roles, held significant sway over the production. He was the film's original advocate, and as its top-billed star, carried both creative authority and studio clout. McQueen, despite his talent, felt the imbalance keenly. His power disparity stoked the fire of rivalry, leading McQueen to assert himself in the only ways he could, through calculated gestures designed to erode Brenner's dominance. While many stars might have retaliated or demanded disciplinary action, Brenner never publicly confronted McQueen. In fact, he maintained a composed, professional front throughout the production. Years later, when asked about the tension, Brenner famously remarked, "I feuded with studios, not actors." The quote was more than a throwaway line. It was a pointed reflection of Brenner's discipline and control. He may have been aware of McQueen's tactics, but he chose to rise above the provocations, refusing to let the feud disrupt the film or his own reputation. Though neither ever engaged in outright verbal fights, the passive-aggressive nature of their conflict meant that it never erupted into a full-blown feud, but it lingered, quietly shaping the way scenes were performed and how their characters were portrayed. Interestingly, McQueen's strategies ultimately worked to his advantage. Despite having fewer lines, his magnetic presence stole many scenes and audiences took notice. His portrayal of Veng Tanner helped launch him into full-blown stardom. Within a few years, McQueen had eclipsed most of his Magnificent Seven co-stars in fame, becoming one of the highest-paid and most bankable stars of the 1960s and 1970s. Yet for all his success, McQueen's behavior during the Magnificent Seven remains a case study in ambition turned adversarial. His rivalry with Brenner wasn't born of hatred, but of fierce competition in a town where every gesture counted and every moment on screen mattered. It was a reflection of the cutthroat nature of Hollywood, where even a flick of a coin or the subtle shifting of dirt could signal a battle for dominance. *** Dustin Hoffman *** when Papillon in 1973 brought together two of the most celebrated actors of their era, Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, many expected fireworks, both on screen and off. McQueen, the king of cool, was known for his magnetic presence, quiet intensity, and often difficult temperament on set. Hoffman, fresh from the critical success of The Graduate and Midnight Cowboy, had carved a reputation as a cerebral, method-driven actor who immersed himself in character with obsessive detail. The pairing was intriguing. McQueen, the rugged physical anti-hero, and Hoffman, the introspective intellectual performer. Surprisingly, however, despite their contrasting styles and temperaments, no significant on-set conflict between them has ever been publicly confirmed. Papillon, based on the memoirs of French convict Henri Charrière, was an ambitious, grueling production. Shot in remote and challenging locations across Jamaica, Spain, and Hawaii, the film depicted the brutal conditions of a penal colony in French Guiana. McQueen took on the title role of Charrière, known as Papillon, while Hoffman played Louis Degas, a mild-mannered forger whose unlikely friendship with Papillon becomes the heart of the story. The film required physical endurance, emotional vulnerability, and a commitment to telling a raw, harrowing story of survival, betrayal, and human resilience. Given McQueen's history of feuding with co-stars and asserting his dominance, most notably with Yul Brynner and Paul Newman, there was speculation at the time that he might view Hoffman, a fellow marquee name, as competition. But that speculation never materialized into anything concrete. In fact, documented accounts of tension or hostility between McQueen and Hoffman are remarkably absent from the production's history. Neither actor in later Interviews ever spoke of any animosity or disagreement during the making of the film. Hoffman's approach to acting was dramatically different from McQueen's. He famously immersed himself in character, often staying in his role between takes and scrutinizing each line for emotional truth. McQueen, in contrast, preferred minimalism. He trusted instinct over rehearsal and movement over verbosity. In any other pairing, these styles might have clashed, but in Papillon, they appeared to complement each other, creating a quiet tension between the two characters that served the story rather than undermining it. McQueen's Papillon is desperate, wild, and defiant, a man whose body and will are repeatedly broken and rebuilt. Hoffman's Dega, meanwhile, is soft-spoken and cerebral, more a survivor through caution and cunning than brute force. Their dynamic relies heavily on contrast. As a result, Hoffman's more subdued performance often acted as a foil to McQueen's physical intensity. Rather than compete for attention, each actor carved out a space that enhanced the other's presence. If McQueen ever resented Hoffman's critical praise, he kept it to himself. What commentary does exist surrounding the film tends to highlight Hoffman's performance as one of the more nuanced aspects of Papillon. Critics noted his ability to embody a man whose cowardice masks a deep humanity, and some felt Hoffman gave the film its emotional core. McQueen, on the other hand, was praised for his powerful portrayal of endurance and rebellion, particularly in the film's most iconic scene, where Papillon stands bloodied and defiant in solitary confinement, shouting, "I'm still here." Some observers have speculated that McQueen may have quietly bristled at the attention Hoffman received, especially given McQueen's intense sensitivity about screen presence and public perception. But these ideas are based more on knowledge of McQueen's past behavior than any actual evidence from Papillon. In truth, McQueen appeared to respect the film's structure, which placed him at the center while allowing Hoffman room to shine in a supporting though vital role. Director Franklin J. Schaffner, best known for Patton and Planet of the Apes, also played a key role in managing the dynamics. His calm, authoritative style kept the production relatively free of conflict. If any tensions arose between the leads, Schaffner either resolved them privately or prevented them from escalating. Cast and crew who worked on the film later described the shoot as arduous but disciplined, marked more by the harsh filming conditions than any interpersonal drama. In the years following Papillon, both actors continued on their respective paths. McQueen moved further into selective roles, becoming increasingly reclusive before his untimely death in 1980. Hoffman entered the most prolific period of his career, eventually winning 2 Academy Awards and cementing his place as one of Hollywood's most respected performers. Neither ever revisited Papillon in extensive public interviews, though Hoffman would speak warmly of the experience in brief mentions, and McQueen reportedly considered the role one of his most demanding and rewarding. James Garner. The Great Escape in 1963 assembled its ensemble of charismatic all-male stars to tell the story of a daring World War II prison break. Few cast members burned as brightly or as controversially as Steve McQueen. At the time, McQueen was already becoming a cultural icon, known for his rugged, cool, brooding silence and effortless presence on screen. But behind the camera, his colleagues didn't always view him so favorably. One of his co-stars, James Garner, offered a particularly blunt assessment of McQueen's behavior during the film, delivering what many later saw as one of the most honest critiques of the King of Cool. Garner, who played the resourceful scrounger Hendley, shared top billing with McQueen in the beloved war adventure. While the two maintained professional civility on set, Garner did not mince words in later interviews. Speaking about McQueen's temperament and on-set conduct, Garner remarked, "Like Marlon Brando, he could be a pain in the ass on set. Unlike Brando, he wasn't an actor. He was a movie star, a poser who cultivated the image of a macho man. The comment cut through decades of Hollywood mythology surrounding McQueen, suggesting that beneath the carefully crafted persona was a man more obsessed with maintaining his image than honing his craft. To Garner, McQueen's behavior seemed inauthentic, even forced. He characterized McQueen as someone who was always on, constantly performing, not just for the cameras, but for everyone around him. Whether it was the way he moved, spoke, or even stood in a scene, Garner believed McQueen was chasing the appearance of rugged masculinity rather than genuinely embodying it. In Garner's eyes, McQueen's acting lacked depth. It was style over substance, presence over emotional resonance. Director John Sturges, who had previously worked with McQueen on The Magnificent Seven, understood the actor's temperament all too well. Knowing McQueen's fragile ego and competitive nature could derail the harmony of a large ensemble cast, Sturges reportedly made behind-the-scenes concessions to keep him happy. As the film developed, it became clear that McQueen was becoming restless. Despite playing cooler King Virgil Hilts, one of the film's most beloved characters, he worried that the script didn't give him enough opportunity to shine. To address this, Sturges and the team helped tailor scenes specifically to appease McQueen, most notably by expanding the now legendary motorcycle chase sequence, which wasn't part of the original escape narrative. McQueen, a passionate motorcyclist in real life, seized on the idea, and the stunt quickly became central to both his performance and the film's marketing. Though it did little to move the plot forward, the motorcycle jump over a barbed wire fence became the Great Escape's defining moment, and McQueen's most iconic screen image. Garner later acknowledged that this was a calculated compromise. Still, the rivalry became an open secret in Hollywood circles. The cast and crew reportedly sensed the chill between the two men. Giving McQueen something flashy to do kept him distracted and satisfied, allowing the rest of the production to proceed without constant friction. Give him the bike, give him the spotlight, Garner once implied, and he'll stop complaining. Yet beneath this concession was a clear judgment. McQueen needed toys and theatrics to feel validated, while actors like Garner found purpose in the ensemble and the story. It wasn't that McQueen was universally disliked. Many cast members admired his charisma and undeniable screen magnetism. Even Garner conceded that McQueen had great presence, a phrase often reserved for those with instinctive appeal, even if not classical training. But respect for McQueen's talent as an actor was more elusive. Garner, a man known for his own low-key professionalism and no-nonsense work ethic, saw in McQueen a carefully manufactured persona, the brooding loner, the motorcycle rebel, the silent alpha male. And to Garner, that performance never really ended when the cameras stopped rolling. Interestingly, McQueen may have sensed some of the skepticism around him. He was known to be deeply insecure, despite his tough exterior, often comparing his screen time, lines, and billing with other stars. On The Great Escape, he even considered quitting the film midway through production, fearing his role was too small compared to others. Sturges had to talk him down, assuring him the script would be adjusted to give him more prominence, another indication that McQueen's ego had to be managed delicately throughout the shoot. Despite the internal friction, The Great Escape remains one of the most celebrated war films in cinematic history. Its blend of ensemble camaraderie, suspenseful plotting, and unforgettable moments, particularly McQueen's high-speed motorcycle sequence, cemented its place in pop culture. Ironically, the very accommodations made to pacify McQueen's ego helped make the film iconic. The motorcycle stunt, though narratively unnecessary, became the film's calling card and catapulted McQueen into global superstardom. Bruce Lee, though Steve McQueen and Bruce Lee never exchanged harsh words or public insults, their relationship was marked by an unspoken rivalry, a quiet competitive undercurrent that played out more in glances and gestures than open confrontation. It was never a feud in the traditional sense. Instead, what unfolded between them was a kind of sibling-like professional tension shaped by mutual admiration, diverging ambitions, and the subtle threat of one star's rise overlapping another's. Dominance. Steve McQueen, by the late 1960s, had firmly secured his place as Hollywood's king of cool. With a string of hits like The Great Escape, Bullet, and The Thomas Crown Affair, he embodied the modern anti-hero, stoic, rebellious, effortlessly masculine. Audiences adored him, and he carefully controlled his image, cultivating an aloof, hard-edged charisma that became his signature. Enter Bruce Lee, a dynamic martial artist and philosopher who was at first more of an underground figure in American entertainment, appearing in small roles, training celebrities in martial arts, and slowly building a name for himself outside the studio system. McQueen and Lee met through that very connection. Lee served as a private martial arts instructor to several Hollywood elites, including James Coburn, Roman Polanski, and notably McQueen himself. At first, their relationship was relatively cordial. McQueen was genuinely impressed by Lee's unparalleled speed, discipline, and technique. In private sessions, McQueen trained hard under Lee's guidance, and the two seemed to form a bond built on mutual respect. Lee admired McQueen's confidence and screen presence, while McQueen respected Lee's physical mastery, skills he himself knew he could never replicate. However, as Lee's aspirations grew beyond being just a behind-the-scenes trainer or character actor, the tone between them subtly shifted. Lee made no secret of his dream to become a leading man in Hollywood, an action star with global reach. Wanted not just fame, but artistic control. And as he began voicing those ambitions more loudly, it reportedly made McQueen uneasy. For all his apparent self-assurance, McQueen was known to be highly protective of his stardom, sometimes to the point of pettiness. He had clashed with co-stars like Yul Brynner and Paul Newman, meticulously counting lines, screen time, and billing positions to ensure his dominance. So when a younger, hungrier talent like Bruce Lee began reaching for the same spotlight, McQueen couldn't help but feel the familiar sting of competition. The tension wasn't rooted in open hostility, but in something more personal, territorial pride. McQueen had spent years climbing through the Hollywood ranks, cultivating a persona that blended ruggedness with a touch of introspection. Lee, meanwhile, brought something radically new to the screen: blistering action, Eastern philosophy, and a global perspective on cinema. McQueen reportedly bristled when Lee suggested he would one day be the biggest movie star in the world. While McQueen never confronted Lee publicly, he allegedly began to pull back slightly, becoming more guarded, as if sensing that Lee's rise could signal a shift in the power structure of male stardom. Despite this undercurrent of rivalry, there remained a level of respect between the two men, especially from McQueen's side. He may have felt threatened, but he also recognized Lee's brilliance. The clearest indication of this came after Lee's sudden and shocking death in 1973, at the age of just 32. McQueen, famously reclusive and deeply uncomfortable with public mourning, almost never attended funerals, not even for colleagues or close friends. But he made an exception for Bruce Lee. Clad in a dark suit, McQueen attended Lee's funeral. In Los Angeles, standing among Lee's other students and pallbearers. It was a silent but powerful gesture. Those close to McQueen noted how unusual it was for him to appear at such an event, suggesting that his presence that day was more than ideal, just a formality. It was a mark of genuine admiration and grief. Whatever tension had once existed between them was now overshadowed by the recognition that a bright, singular talent had been lost far too soon. Bruce Lee, for his part, never publicly criticized McQueen. If he sensed any resentment, he didn't speak of it. Instead, He often pointed to McQueen as someone he respected and studied, a model of coolness, control, and command over the camera. Lee even reportedly hoped to recruit McQueen for a future film project, evidence that despite any quiet competitiveness, he still viewed McQueen as a cinematic force worth collaborating with. When Norman Jewison first worked with Steve McQueen on The Cincinnati Kid in 1965, he saw in him the makings of a cinematic icon, rugged, cool, unpredictable, but also elusive. Their collaboration would span 2 major films, including the stylish crime caper The Thomas Crown Affair in 1968. Yet, the relationship between director and actor never quite settled into camaraderie. Instead, Jewison left both productions with a deep impression. McQueen, for all his charisma, was a loner to the core, emotionally distant, difficult to reach, and profoundly isolated, even amid the chaos of a busy set. In interviews later in life, Jewison would reflect on this dynamic with a tinge of frustration, calling McQueen the most alone man I've ever met. This wasn't just a poetic observation. It was a blunt assessment of what made McQueen so challenging to work with. According to the director, McQueen seemed incapable of true collaboration. He rarely engaged with crew members unless necessary, kept his emotional cards close, and often worked in a transactional rather than a team-oriented manner. What might have been interpreted by fans as stoic independence felt to those behind the scenes more like withholding and detachment. Jewison also didn't shy away from addressing McQueen's personal habits, many of which grated on the director and contributed to an atmosphere of tension on set. Chief among Jewison's complaints was McQueen's notorious frugality. He was a cheapskate, the director once said, with a mix of amusement and exasperation. He never carried cash, always asked people for gas money, and stiffed the crew whenever he could. This stinginess wasn't a one-time incident. It became something of a running theme. For example, on The Thomas Crown Affair, McQueen was known to duck out of covering small costs, even while playing a millionaire who exuded effortless luxury on screen. For Jewison and others, this behavior created a strange and uncomfortable dissonance. On camera, McQueen embodied confidence, wealth, and magnetism. Off camera, he was tight-fisted, mistrustful, and emotionally guarded. Though many directors tolerated or even embraced the quirks of difficult actors if it meant getting great performances, Jewison found McQueen's self-centeredness disruptive. It wasn't just about money. It was about a fundamental unwillingness to support those around him. The small gestures that might have built goodwill with cast and crew were absent, replaced by a quiet resistance to anything that didn't directly serve McQueen's needs or ego. That ego, too, was no small challenge. While McQueen never lashed out or had explosive tantrums, Jewison recalled a constant negotiation of McQueen's sense of importance. He had to be flattered, managed, and coaxed into trusting the creative process. There were frequent debates over script decisions, camera angles, and character development, especially in The Thomas Crown Affair, where McQueen's ultra-cool persona was being carefully cultivated. Jewison wanted layers and nuance. McQueen often wanted control. Yet, even in the midst of these frictions, there remained a begrudging respect. Jewison never denied that McQueen had screen presence like few others. He understood how the camera loved McQueen, how his silence could speak volumes, how his restrained gestures created a kind of cinematic poetry. But Jewison also believed that McQueen's refusal to connect with others, both emotionally and practically, was a barrier to deeper greatness. Perhaps what bothered Jewison most wasn't McQueen's stubbornness or stinginess, but the fact that all of it seemed rooted in an unresolved inner emptiness. His comment that McQueen was the most alone man he'd ever known wasn't meant as an insult. It was in some ways an expression of sadness. Jewison saw an actor who had everything in terms of talent and allure, but lacked the capacity or the willingness to let people in. That solitude, however romanticized it might be on screen, came at a cost behind the scenes. What do you think about the co-stars that Steve McQueen hated? Leave us your comments in the section below. We hope you have found this helpful video. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching this, and see you in the next videos. Goodbye.